Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Dr. Jody Jacobson Fry. I co-chair the National Committee for Workplace Suicide Prevention and Postvention with Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas. And I'm so glad that you've all decided to join us today for this presentation on suicide postvention, when death breaks all the rules. Our presenter today is Bob VandePol, and on our next slide, we can see some of his bio. I've known Bob for a very long time and have always been very excited to hear him speak. Excited to have him here today. Bob is the founder of VandePol Crisis Response Services and is a master trainer in World Maker Resilience Institute. He's also the former president of Crisis Care Network, which is now R3 Continuum, and is the co-chair of NAASP's Workplace Task Force. Before I turn it over to Bob, I just would like to say a minute about the committee. Our committee worked to create and disseminate the national guidelines for workplace suicide prevention. They're supported by two organizations, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and United Suicide Survivors International. The guidelines were launched in 2019 and are based on 8 guiding principles. They also take a multidimensional, comprehensive approach to suicide prevention, which includes upstream, midstream, and downstream practices. Today's talk on postvention will focus mostly on the downstream approaches, but also connect back to suicide as postvention as prevention and an upstream approach. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to turn it over to our guest speaker, Bob, and thank you again for sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
Thank you, Jody. Always a pleasure and honored. So my goals today, we're going to talk about clinical best practices. We're going to talk about workplace and organizational best practices. We're going to talk about leadership, and those can all seem a little bit cold and data-driven. But I just want to acknowledge that we're talking about people. We're talking about people that we loved. We're talking about people that were loved, and never lose sight of that. So as Dr. Jacobson Fry talked about, I presented on this topic almost exactly 1 year ago and gave kind of a high-arching presentation on postvention, with the emphasis being on that postvention can be prevention as well. Today, I'm going to take a narrower view and unpack it a bit. And I'm going to talk about what's actually happening in the minds and hearts of those that are impacted by a death by suicide, because that's important for leaders to get in terms of their own reactions and the reactions of the people that they are leading. So I'm going to talk some about the cognitive distortion that happens following death by suicide. And then I'm going to talk about, when a death by suicide happens, we all have philosophies about why, right? That's the word that emerges over and over again, why. And we're often doing that not necessarily out of the most advanced portions of our brain, and that can lead to additional tragedies. And we don't want one tragedy to lead to another, especially a subsequent death by suicide, but there are other negative outcomes that can happen in that context as well. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about how do you center yourself? How do you mitigate some of those negative outcomes? Let's jump in. So the statement of the problem is that how survivors of suicide attribute meaning and responsibility to it can be predictive of their subsequent outcomes. And oftentimes that can just be boiled down, condensed into whose fault was it? Whose fault was it? And at a very primitive level, that's where our brains go. That's where our brains go because it shakes us so deeply. There's a primitive portion of our own brain that looks at, what if it was me? What if it was me? And danger is present, and we're shaken and don't think very clearly. So, we all have an idea about what our death is supposed to look like. From the very, very, very beginning. Someone finds out that they're pregnant and they immediately begin tremendous prenatal care, hopefully, right? And they do more walking and they stop smoking and drinking if that's what they're doing. And they think about it and they start to decorate a nursery and they go to a highly specialized location and pay a highly trained person to deliver this little bundle of joy. And then they go, oh my gosh, we should have studied for this class, but they go home and to a nursery and everything is good. It's the best diapers you can afford and it's how you're feeding them and everything is careful. And then you're so proud of them when they roll over and when they crawl and when they take their first steps and you get them colors because you want to get them started academically and you get them into the best preschool that you can and then you support them all the way through their academic and you curriculum, and then you teach them rules like look both ways, brush with crest, stop, drop, and roll. And then we get them into school and we have them in dance and we have them in soccer, and everything is moving forward to get a great education at some point, learn some leadership skills, build good relationships, get a great job, build a career, start your own family. And everything is moving this way so that we all arrive safely and healthily at our own death at age 92 with dignity, painlessly, and for me, with my family surrounding me singing Amazing Grace or something like that. Okay? That's the plan. That's the plan for our lives. And this is the program that we're all running. We're all doing this one, and that's the normal, right? And that's why it's so shocking when someone dies early, because that's not the way it's supposed to happen. People aren't supposed to die before their parents. That's shocking. People aren't supposed to die young, especially healthy people who die of a heart attack while they're jogging, right? It just shocks us. But nothing shocks us so much in that whole theme of moving toward that death at 92 as when someone dies by suicide. Because it's like all the cars are going this way on the freeway and one is going the wrong way down a one-way street, right? And it shocks us. And when it shocks us, when we are shocked on a primitive level, we think differently. Okay. So maybe some of you are familiar with Dan Siegel's work on brain function. Very simplistic. I love this model because it's understandable. Um, I have trained folks from senior citizens down to children, and I've done it all around the world, and everybody kind of gets it. So we go like this. This is our brain. Okay? This is our brain. This is not the this is your brain on drugs commercial. This is a very primitive part of your brain. It's, your brain stem. It would fail every IQ test, but it's brilliant in terms of infrastructure. Without you pushing a button, without you pulling a switch, it helps you to sweat and to breathe and to swallow and to digest and do all the things that just happen naturally. Okay? This part of your brain right here is, as measured by an IQ test, the smartest part of your brain. It's your prefrontal cortex and some other portions, but that's good enough. That's the part of your brain that's executive functioning. That's a part of your brain that makes you pay attention when you don't want to. It helps you to think abstractly, helps you to multitask, take in multiple sources of information and make one decision. It's part of your brain that helps to see the gray between black and white. It's fair. It's logical. Under the impact of shock, and it doesn't have to be us that's in danger. It can be a shock to someone close to us. It can be the threat of losing something precious to us, like our dignity, like our sense of what's going to happen in the world. Almost all of us go offline. Okay? Because this part of your brain is really smart, but figuratively speaking, it's got a lot of apps open and it's slow. And when danger is present, it goes offline and defers to this right here. It's called your amygdala. It's part of your limbic system. It's connected to your hippocampus also. But this is the part of your brain that is fast. This is a part of your brain that reacts when we are shocked, and it kicks into fight, flight, freeze. Okay? And it's reactive. It's quick. It's immediate. It tends to be somewhat self-centered because it's focused upon my survival. It is extremely black and white. It's linear. It's emotional. And part of what it's focused on doing immediately is trying to identify what's the source of the threat. Okay? What's the source of the threat? Because if I'm feeling in danger, I want to know where the threat is so I know whether to fight, take flight, or freeze. Active shooter, they always talk about evacuate quickly, lock down and barricade, or take action, right? The same three steps. But that's where my brain is going. That's where my brain is going, and it is not sophisticated. It doesn't see multiple causation. It's not fair. It's black and white, and it's kind of looking for a bad guy. That's its key. Now think about that, how that happens. Because when we are now attempting to solve deep existential, philosophical, theological questions like why do bad things happen to good people? Why would this person who seemed to have so much going for them choose to end their life? Why didn't they ask me? Why didn't they get support? Why didn't they let people know how desperate they were? Why didn't they see hope when the rest of us proceed with an expectation of good things for tomorrow, or at least good enough things for tomorrow? And when we try to solve those deep existential questions out of this part of our brain, our response is likely to be very emotional. It's going to be self-serving. It's going to be reactive. It's going to be linear. It's going to be black and white, and it's going to look for a bad guy. And so frequently, when someone dies by suicide, you will hear people simplistically blurt, well, of course, his wife left him. She got laid off, got cut from the soccer team, embarrassed and ashamed of something moving forward. And we tend to quickly go to one thing, which isn't helpful, and which often results in a finger pointed at someone in blame because we try to make sense out of something that's so senseless and so frightening and hopefully so foreign to us, but maybe not. And so that can fragment a work team, that can fragment a family, that can fragment a friendship, that can fragment any organization because people are now trying to make sense or trying to do this out of the part of the brain that is totally inadequate to deal with those level of questions. It's also true that many times when there isn't a readily available bad guy, or when we are particularly close to the person who has died, where that finger of blame goes, and that's when the woulda, shoulda, couldas emerge. Why did I miss? Why did I say what I said? Why didn't I say what I said? Why didn't I follow up with them? And we tend to blame and to punish ourselves as well. And so if you look at these two dynamics right here, you can see where fragmentation can take place, where intense conflict can take place, where intense self-flagellation leading to a need to punish ourselves can take place. Okay? With a touch of irreverence here, we're trying to solve deep existential problems out of the dumbest part of our brains, so we should knock it off. Okay? Because we're not going to get there. Now, it's also true that whenever there's a death, we grieve because it's sad. It's sad. And the same brain function takes place, and styles of grief and family rules and cultural rules for grief kick in. And oftentimes there'll be different polarizations that separate people. and leave lots of room for self-judgment and for judgment of others. One example of that is that when some people lose someone close to them to death, their grief process is that they lament and they grieve and they feel deeply and they want to talk and they want to express. Oh, wonderful. That's all a great way to grieve, but not everybody does it that way. And some people say, heck no, I don't want to be that emotionally vulnerable. I grieve by taking control of something because I felt so helpless at this person's death, especially a death by suicide. And I need to go do something where I have some control, where there's a direct correlation between my effort and the outcome. So I've got to go build something, paint something, mow something, exercise something, break something cheap, something where I move forward. I need to answer all my emails and clean my house and my garage and my car. Now you can see how that can separate a relationship. So say we've got a marriage, we've got a family, we've got a work team, we've got partners, and one does one and one does the other. And you can see where the person who's lamenting feels abandoned and perhaps ashamed, perhaps shamed, because I really need to talk and I took off. And the person who's uncomfortable with that may feel trapped because that's not how I do it. And I'm not comfortable being that emotionally vulnerable. It makes me feel worse. So why would I do it? Right? You can see where that happens. And there's a need within there's a need within any relationship or any organization for people to be able to understand and to be able to offer each other some grace and some flexibility to, I'm sorry, I miss them too. I'm just not ready to talk about it yet. Here's somebody who's a better listener than I am right now, and to be able to grant permission in the other way. So the answer to do we grieve or do we move forward is yes. We move forward sadly. And so we encourage people to use the person's name because we're not erasing them from history. They're important to us. So we're going to use their name, and yes, we'll talk about them, but we'll do it in places where people have options about their vulnerability. Otherwise, one tragedy can lead to another and can lead even to increased risk for suicide. Because either one of these situations, if I'm blaming somebody else, I'm blaming myself, that isolates people. One of the greatest suicide protection and prevention measures is involvement in trusted relationships and asking for help and offering help, right? And if we fragment, we don't do that. So just quickly, some action steps. If you or those around you are going through the shock and the grief, because it's both. It's both. Suicide is frightening. It's frightening because it breaks all the rules. And so it increases our fear and our anxiety as well as our grief. Okay, both. And so emotionally, encourage people, how do you regulate yourself? When you're starting to lose it, when you're starting to flip your lid and emotions are overpowering you, what are some things that you do? And there are all kinds of techniques. There are breathing techniques that can lower your blood pressure and produce calming. Some people use box breathing, some people use cyclic breathing, other techniques. Sometimes it's centering activities because when I am overwhelmed by something as shocking as suicide, I'm thinking about the future, the past, and other people, and I can't control any of those. And so I need to focus on my own backyard. I need to focus on me and now because those are the only things I can control, right? And so there are exercises, there are centering mindfulness type exercises. Bilateral stimulation is helpful in calming. That's a whole nother workshop. And also gratitude. Gratitude is helpful. Um, our brain does not fire gratitude and anger at the same time, or gratitude and anxiety or fear at the same time. Nobody has ever been ticked off for being too grateful, right? So intentionally doing that. So the emotional regulation, how do I center my emotions? And then cognitively, I need to be more flexible. I need to slow myself down so that I don't immediately go to one thing caused one thing and one person caused it, whether that's someone else or that's me or that's the person who died. And I need to be cognitively flexible so I can consider that there might be other perspectives regarding this same issue, that I don't immediately lock into what is my immediate reaction and my favorite, right? Okay. Education regarding suicide is helpful. Education regarding the role of depression, the role of alcohol, the role of anxiety, the role of insomnia, and that not every suicide is the same. There are suicides that are a long progression toward following a plan and doing it. And there are many, many suicides also that are more impulsive reactions, actions. So very frequently when you ask someone, how long were you thinking about suicide before you made your attempt? And they'll say 10 minutes, or I was drunk. And that's important for the postvention also for people to understand, because otherwise we blame ourselves for things over which we have very little responsibility. There are also studies that talk about how initially during a course of depression where people will see the resources around them and they will see those people as allies. And as they move further and further down that hallway, they stop seeing the allies and they see opponents because they'll stop what I'm doing. And that's painful because I hate to think of someone that I love as seeing me as an opponent. And there's a small piece of comfort in that they really worked hard to hide it from me. And I think the most important action step that we can take is grace, that we can offer flexibility. And we offer that grace to the person who died. We offer that grace to others that we may reactively, immediately blame for that death, and that we offer grace to ourselves. Okay. I think that's the end of my spiffy slides. And here's some resources and references, some articles. This will be distributed to you. And I'm going to hand it back to Jody and see if I can find my way back to the right room for Q&A.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much for this impactful and informative presentation on postvention. I know so many people will have some great takeaways to bring this back to their workplace and their community as they think about what's needed and how they can be supportive in the short term, but also in the long run. So really appreciate the content and information today. And just want to say thank you to everybody who's joining us online. As a reminder, you can go to www.workplacesuicideprevention.com for many of the resources that Bob listed, a number of the webinars that we've done. And also, I would encourage you to take a moment to take our pledge to make suicide prevention part of the solution in your workplace and make it a health and safety priority. Thank you again. Bye-bye.